would be novel to actually have a hard copy, or if not, a phone or a laptop of some kind of device, or your memory. There's a good one for you. Some of you actually do have parts of today's text memorized without even realizing it. It is Psalm 46, and interestingly enough, in the years of my ministry, when I have had opportunity to ask people what their favorite psalm is, or even more significantly, maybe what their famous piece of scripture is, you always expect people to say the 23rd Psalm. Almost as often, people will say Psalm 46. I had one good friend when I was at the Salem church who was taking care of her husband who was suffering from dementia. And for about 3 years, she cared for him. And I would go and visit with them. I had known him at the beginning of that process. He was a longtime educator in the state of New Jersey. In the end of his career, he worked for the State Department of Education, and he just began to deteriorate. And she kept him in their little home by the Delaware River in Salem. And I would sit with them. Some days he would recognize me, and some days he wouldn't know who I was. And Wendy would say to me, I don't know what I would do without Psalm 46. And some of you, quite possibly, have had that same experience. It's an interesting psalm when we look at it carefully, because it swings back and forth from one crescendo to another. I can remember my senior year in college, the year we last lost the Capital Cup to the University of Richmond. I got a nice little text from my friend Dave yesterday. I wasn't even paying attention to the game, and I got this text out of nowhere that said, "Ha ha, we beat you," or something to that extent. And which caused me to then look up the game on my phone and find out that it must have been quite a game. But my senior year, the football team began doing something different in their pregame warm-ups after they had already warmed up, and just prior to the start of the game, the whole team would go out into the area in front of one end zone, and they would line up as if they were doing calisthenics. And it was very interesting. They'd all begin clapping very loudly and shouting. And then one of the players had been designated beforehand. There were 3 or 4 of them each week that would get to do it. And the whole crowd, after a while, would be ready for this kind of pre-game pep rally, it almost was. One guy would come running from the ranks. He would do a shoulder roll, and then he would stand before the whole team, and he would go like this. And as soon as he went like this, everybody would be quiet. And then following his lead, he would slap on his thigh pad, another thigh pad, then their chest, then their helmet, and they would just be still. And the crowd would go into a hush. It would go from noisy to quiet, and then they would begin clapping again. And the guy would go back to his place, and then after a while, another person would come out, and as soon as he went like this, there would be stillness until they hit their pads and hit their helmets. And then the whole thing would start up again. As I've been reading Psalm 46 this week, I've kind of had the same experience. It is a psalm that goes from one contrast to another. It goes from quiet to exaltation. So as I read, kind of get a feel for this. God is our refuge and strength. You know it, don't you? God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in an uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see. See what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields and chariots with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. I've shared with you before that when I was a kid, we lived on the railroad. A railroad split our town right in two. We lived on the hill on one side of the railroad. The town was nestled on the other side of the railroad. If you walked to school from the neighborhoods where we lived, you had to cross the tracks. And because we lived so near the tracks, despite the fact that our parents were always saying, don't go near the railroad tracks, that was like saying, go play by the railroad tracks. Because that's what we did. And there was always that sign at the railroad crossings. And of course, when you went to school in a town that had a railroad running through it, you were always taught, even before you learned how to read, that cross sign said on it, how many of you remember? Stop, look, and listen. I think they were the first words that some of us ever learned, particularly if you live by the railroad. Stop, look, and listen. Oh, I can remember because it was a constant pastime. We would walk the rails. I can still remember the expression on my brother's face. His eyes would always bulge, and he would go like this. He got the same look when he was a fireman and the siren was going off. And I would look. We would all look. We couldn't see the train yet. So we would get down and we would feel the rails, and they would begin to tremble. Sometimes we'd put our ear to the rail. You could hear a faint sound. And then we would stand and we would look to the horizon. And eventually that train would come. And if we brought a penny, didn't want to waste a quarter or a nickel, we'd put a penny down on the rail. And we'd climb back down the train bed and we would step back. And quite often, the train guys, as they would go by, would go like this to us, as if to say, don't get near the train. And as soon as the train was by, we would run up to the rail and see what our penny looked like. Every kid in town had his own collection of bent coins from the railroad. When you came to the crossing in your car, that cross sign was there, and it would say, stop, look, and listen. And every car, when you were just driving from one side of town to the other side of town, you were supposed to stop at the railroad crossing. There was one at Philmont Station, and there was one right on Red Line Road. It was the only way we could get to town and get back from town. We had to cross that railroad crossing, and when I was a younger kid, it was just a little flashing light that was supposed to go on. It never worked right. You could never trust it. And theoretically, every car was supposed to stop and look and listen, and then you would drive across. Well, then they replaced it with a new method of modern technology, the gate. Somewhere there was a switch thrown as the train was approaching probably about a mile down the railway, and the gate would automatically go down. It would cover half the road, that the right-hand side if you were going one way, and the other side, another half gate would go down. And invariably, technology failed. The gate wouldn't go back up. And you'd wait, and you'd wait, and you'd wait. And there would always be some hot dog behind you who would be beeping his horn. Come on, Kinger, take a chance. And you very slowly creep around the one side of the gate, and you'd look to either side, and then you'd kind of weave Crazy 8 fashion to get around the other side of the gate, and you'd go up the road, and the car on the other side would be going like this, and then about a minute later it would be doing the same thing, because we realized the gate was stuck. And yet I can remember seeing pictures in the local paper of the cars that got hit by the trains at those crossings, because they failed to stop, to look, and to listen. We love this verse, don't we? And yet we struggle with it. Be still and know that I am God. When you're parents of a young child, for the first time in your life, you relish those moments when things are still. It can be a sweet, sweet time. But there are also times when our insides are churning and our heart is breaking, and that word comes across: stop, look, listen, be still. Be still. I am God. I am Christ the King. And though the nations roar, though the rivers roar, though there's tumult all around, I'm the King. I will break the bows and the spears that may come upon you. They're nothing to me. Be still. Wait for the Lord. Stop. Look. listen. And then there is the next word. Repeat it in 2 sentences. And I confess to you, when I saw that this was the psalm for Christ the King Sunday, I couldn't resist. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Are you struggling with some fears? Are you a bit overwhelmed? Are you wondering if you're going to make it? Or sometimes even more significant, wondering if the folks around you are going to make it. Don't forget who's in charge. When we proclaimed at Easter time that he shall reign forever and ever, don't forget, he still reigns. He is the King. And that's what this last day of the Christian year is all about. He's the King. He's sovereign. He's in charge. Nothing will take place beneath him without him being sovereign over it. Even those things that hurt, even those things that cause us confusion, even our loneliness. He's the King. He has died for us, and he's risen again for us, and he reigns in power over us. At the right hand, as we confess this morning, of God the Father Almighty. All that is the Father's is his. He's the King, and he is saying to us, through the psalmist, I will be exalted. Worship me. Trust in me. Know, no matter what is happening, that I know what I'm doing. And I will bring everything to pass according to my good and sovereign will. The Lord Almighty is with us, the psalmist concludes. The God of Jacob is our fortress. And I, with Joan, would sing, if I could sing, give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks. And my blessing upon you is to have a wonderful Thanksgiving celebration with whomever that takes place. Enjoy, but sometime in the midst of it, be still. Be still. Stop. Look. And listen. He is a great God. Let us pray.